When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messa & Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messa & Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Hello, Eagles fans. I'm your guy, Tony DeShields II. I'm joined by none other than our Philadelphia Eagles insider, John McMullen, and this is Football 24/7. First and foremost, make sure you guys smash that like button, and also make sure you guys are subscribed to the JAKIB Sports YouTube network. We really appreciate you guys for always locking in, as you always do. We appreciate the love. We appreciate the support. We even appreciate you guys who begrudgingly come here every day for your daily dose of punishment. So we appreciate you guys for always locking in on the content. Again, make sure you guys smash that like button and make sure you guys are subscribed. And also, if you guys want more content from not just John McMullen, not just myself, always lock in on JAKIB Sports. Check John out on Birds 365 daily, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern time. Also check out his writing on si.com and also on jakibsports.com. And you can also check me out on Sports Take and check me out on the National Football Show. John, first and foremost, my friend, how are you feeling? How's your day treating you?
Yeah, I didn't know people came begrudgingly, but I guess
trust me, they do.
I guess we'll take it. I guess we'll take it.
They do. Trust me, they come, but they can't. They don't know why they come back, but they come back. It's pretty standard, you know, pretty standard.
Well, you got Celia, so you know he's controversial. Yeah,
definitely. He pulls no punches. But yeah, man, you know, it's the off season. You know, this thing is starting to heat up. Eagles made their coordinator hires, and things are starting to trickle down. Can you provide us with any sort of recent updates from the NovaCare complex in regards to these Philadelphia Eagles and any moves they have made, have yet to make, or could be making?
No, all quiet on the coaching front, other than looks like Carl Scott, who was going to come, is not. So a couple reports that he was going to be, one said he was going to be the secondary coach. One said he was going to be some kind of senior defensive coach, depending on the title. Now looks like he's going to stay in Seattle on Mike McDonald's staff, the new head coach out there. So it's one of those things. That's why you got to be careful this time of year when it comes to assistants, because a lot of times, especially in situations where guys are leaving, Pete Carroll's leaving. So, you know, the assumption is the new guy might want to bring in his new people. And that's probably what happened with Carl. And all of a sudden, Mike McDonald gets the job and he says, I'd like to keep Carl Scott. And I don't know his family situation or things like that, but that's a pretty big move, Seattle to Philadelphia.
Yeah, literally coast to coast.
And it could be something as simple as that, if you have kids in school or something of that nature. So Carl's going to stay in Seattle. So the Eagles are back in the market for somebody to either coach the secondary, be a senior defensive advisor type coach. So he's not going to be here. And then, a lot of decisions to be made. Devontae Smith kind of hinted that Aaron Moorhead's still around, which kind of surprises me, to be honest. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be back. But it's one of those situations where Kellen Moore comes in. Maybe he's got somebody in mind to be the receivers coach, and all of a sudden Aaron Moorhead's got to go. But if he doesn't have somebody else, Devontae likes him, AJ likes him, Nick likes him, maybe he gets to stay. So, but Devontae, when he was doing interviews, he and AJ were doing interviews because they have a bounty paper towel thing they're promoting. And he kind of mentioned that with Aaron Moorhead, which was a bit of a surprise because that's a guy I think most people thought probably wasn't going to be brought back.
Yeah, it is interesting because Kellen Moore is such a young guy. He's only 35 or 34 years old. And, granted, he's been an OC for 5 years, but a guy that young, you ask yourself, how large of a Rolodex does he have at his disposal? When it comes to
the Rolodex, my favorite Rolodex.
Is that your favorite word, John?
Yeah, I mean, with coaches, it's not one of my favorite things because that was the Eagles kind of threw that out there at the end with Doug Peterson. Well, and I had that discussion with a bunch of people because Doug was lucky enough, obviously, to play for Andy Reid and get on his staff. So the talk at the time was Nick Sirianni has a bigger Rolodex than Doug Peterson. And I'm like, why? Because he got fired from a bunch of spots and Doug didn't? Like, you're not leaving Andy Reid. Why would you leave?
Right.
Unless he's rid of you. But the other dumb part of that is he played 13 stinking seasons in the league.
Sounds like you have a pretty large Rolodex.
Yeah, you get to know people. So I don't know. That's not the same thing with Kellen Moore. He played 6 years. Still a young guy, but this will be his 6 years as a coordinator too. Started out as a quarterbacks coach, so he knows plenty of people. Plenty of people.
Are there any names that you've heard whispers of in terms of him bringing in guys on the staff?
Mainly Doug Nussmeier, the quarterback coach they had in Dallas and with the Chargers, but until it happens, it doesn't happen. The Eagles have told basically Alex Tanney to start looking for another job. So he's not going to be back. So, there's going to be a move at that particular position. And the fact that Doug has worked with Kellen Moore pretty consistently. And again, moving from Dallas to the Chargers with him would indicate that he's somebody he'd want to bring in. Everybody's obviously got to be on board with him coming in, but the term I heard would be a huge upset if he didn't join the Eagles. So that would be one guy, and maybe that might be the most important position coach that they're going to hire because obviously you got to get Jalen Hurts back on the right track. So he'll have a big part in that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today, I was thinking about, I have been thinking about the Philadelphia Eagles roster from top to bottom. We've been so hung up on their defensive needs. To a certain extent, I feel the offensive needs are kind of being overlooked. And, just at face value, looking at this roster from top to bottom and looking at position group by position group and the different amount of resources allocated to each group, this Philadelphia Eagles team lacks a lot of depth. And, I want to start on the offensive side, the running back room. Kenny Gainwell and some guy named Lou Nichols III.
Poor Lou, man.
And I don't mean any disrespect.
Lou was a great college player, man. Great college player.
Look, I don't mean any disrespect. I'm sure his resume is legitimate in college. But I'm curious to know, when you think about this team, right, on offense, again, I mentioned the running back position, Kenny Gainwell. Then at the wide receiver position, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Britton Covey is a specialist for the most part. I mean, other than that, who can you really put stock in? And then Dallas Goedert, Grant Calcaterra, can he stay healthy? Can Dallas Goedert stay healthy? Beyond those guys, okay, Noah Togiai,
Tungiai. Noah Tungiai.
Excuse me. But I bring all that up because I'm curious to know when you look at this Philadelphia Eagles offense, which is supposed to be their strongest group, how strong can they really be with this lack of depth?
Yeah, I don't. They got to get better depth wise, but I don't know if you can look at any team, and if you have to replace players like A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith or Dallas Goedert or Lane Johnson or Jason Kelsey. I don't know if anybody's equipped to do that. So I think a lot of that is a little bit overblown, because when you lose players like that, it's not like other teams have, we'll just stick somebody else in, then they're perform at that level. But you certainly want better depth. You want to be able to have guys that can at least persevere if they're forced into action. And some guys did. Kaylee Ringo. You bring up Lou Nichols. I wasn't going to go here, but that's a guy I think you might be talking about next summer, because he got here late. He was a draft pick of Green Bay. He led the nation in rushing at Central Michigan. He's a big, powerful back. He's got a little bit of Isaiah Pacheco in him. When he runs hard, but he was here. He got here late, so it's not going to make two when you have veteran running backs. But next summer he might. I'm just saying, put a pin in that for now. But he might turn into something.
Right. And you're absolutely right. And look, again, I know Lou Nichols kind of caught a straight bullet just now, but I guess my overall point is the fact that they have their problems, I think, are much larger than just the defense. And also, I say all that to say, some people look at this as a 1-year fix. I do not. How do you, when you think about all the things the Philadelphia Eagles have to do on this team? What's the length of this fix, right? Do you see this as a 2-year fix, 3-year fix, one-offs? How are you gauging this?
This is, there's teams that go from worst to first in the NFL every season now. It's not like basketball where you're going to be down for 10 years if you don't make the right decision, or you don't lose enough, or you don't get a top 5 pick. You can turn things around quickly in the NFL. Are they going to be a Super Bowl contender? I doubt it. Howie's going to have to make a lot of right decisions all over the place, free agency, the draft. But he's done it before. He's had those types of seasons. So yeah, you can turn around things pretty quickly. If you look at Detroit and their draft with they got a lot of crap for drafting Gibbs and had the big fumble, which didn't help him, but he was a phenomenal player for them during the season. Jack Campbell, a lot of people criticized him. Then they go to the second round. They get Brian Branch and Sam Laporta. I mean, contributor. There's 4 guys, 4 high-level players from the draft. Something like that happens. The Eagles have 3 picks in the top 54, I think. If they get 3 contributors like that, it's going to turn around pretty quickly. But you got to hit. You got to make good decisions, certainly in free agency. And Howie's proven he can do that in the past. And then health is a big part of it as well. You got to stay healthy, and they weren't as healthy this season. But they could turn around things very quickly. My concern is the off-the-field stuff, the coaching stuff. I don't think I've been pretty above board. You got a guy coaching for his job, and everybody knows it. I don't think that's a positive. I never think that's a positive. I don't think it's positive in Dallas. I don't think it's positive here. Um, I like it's funny because I like, Vic Fangio as a defensive coordinator. Don't like the scheme, but nobody's going to criticize Vic as a coach.
Right.
I like Kellen Moore as an offensive coordinator. So I like them in a vacuum. I just don't like the way they were brought here, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, the reality is that the in my opinion, I feel like this season has been plagued by a series of miscues and mishandlings.
Well, I think Jeffrey did a bad job with this, with the way he's handled the coaching situation. I'm very honest about that. I think he did a bad job. And you can go one of two ways, if you show the courage of your convictions, if you think he did that bad of a job that you have to demand all of his lieutenants, this guy's got to go, this guy's got to go, this guy's got to go, then fire him. Just fire him.
And that's your main thing. Don't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Don't straddle the fence.
Exactly.
If it was bad enough to fire his entire staff, why keep him in the building?
Yeah, and certain guys will be back. Obviously, Stout's going to be back, and
of course,
I just mentioned Aaron Moorhead. We'll see. There's no guarantee he's going to be back, but there's a few other guys. Kevin Petula is going to be here, so it's not going to be the whole staff, but it's going to be a significant portion of it. And look, if you don't have that kind of competence in the head coach to pick assistant coaches and things of that nature, then, what are we doing? As I said, so fire him, and show the courage of your convictions. But right now as you mentioned, it feels like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You have a bunch of, contingency plans, whether it's Kellen Moore, whether it's Bick, and that can go in a negative direction. If there's an obvious heir apparent in case things go badly early in the season, so many things. You never want to have a lame duck coach. Nick's not on the final year of his deal, so he's not a lame duck from that standpoint. You never want that, but you also never want somebody to be perceived as coaching for his job. And that's everybody in this league perceives that Nick Sirianni's coaching for his job. And that's never a good thing, because at the first sign of adversity, sometimes it's human nature for guys to say, well, he's not going to be here next year anyway. And that can take things in a really, really bad direction.
That begs the question, is this setting up for, I don't know, power struggle between Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore when it comes to this offense? Because I'm based off everything you're saying, this is not a favorable situation for anybody involved. Do you see power struggle brewing?
I don't know Kellen, haven't met him yet. Going to talk to John Machota, covered him for years in Dallas, tomorrow on the show. So people should tune in to Birds 365 for that, to get their
Machota does a great job, by the way.
Yeah, Kellen Moore info. I don't know him. I haven't met him yet. But there is no power struggle because Jeffrey Lurie defined it. It's his offense.
Wow.
They'll call it the Eagles offense. They'll call it our offense. But he's got the final say. So it's his offense. So there is no power struggle.
Well, okay. So let's frame it like this. Is this setting up for a turbulent relationship between OC and head coach? Again, a guy like Nick Sirianni, who essentially is coaching for his job, you bring in this younger guy to run the offense. And look, there's a human element involved in all of this. there's no way that we can. I'm not saying you're saying this, but there's no way that the people can expect that relationship to just be smooth sailing, knowing what we know about Nick Sirianni's situation.
I wouldn't, but and the term I've heard coined a few times is he thought people got too comfortable, and he wants them to be
Jeffrey.
uncomfortable. Yes,
Okay.
And he wants them to be more uncomfortable. Sometimes that could be a good thing. Sometimes that could be a bad thing. I've never gotten the indication that Kellen Moore is some kind of overbearing personality. So I don't think that's going to be the case.
People got too comfortable. Who do you think he's referring to specifically?
Everybody, the coaches, the players, the quarterback, that's pretty much, and that can happen when you have too much success and all of a sudden you don't start trying to stay ahead of the curve, which I think was the perception from Jeffrey. Everything was too stale. You heard that, stagnant, all those kinds of words. And the assumption is, Nick didn't change anything. And everybody caught up magically on 1 week, San Francisco. So everybody ripped Nick Bosa. And now everybody thinks Nick Bosa was right when he said how you play Jalen Hurts, which is bullshit, as we talk about on here, because people have been trying to do that for 2 years, which is basically just be very disciplined with the pass rush, keep them inside the pocket, force them. And if you are going to, blush, and he mentioned also about Jalen's looking at the pass rush instead of keeping his eyes downfield, stuff like that. So everybody killed him at the time, and now everybody thinks he was right. I just think they weren't as talented. They had more injuries, especially on defense. They just weren't very good on defense. Weren't very good. And, when you start talking about the playoffs, I think a lot of people forget A.J. Brown wasn't in that game. And I think a lot of people forget the Eagles offense before A.J. Brown got here, which was 2021. There was some good and there was some bad, but everything was kind of a struggle. And then I always said he was the final piece of the puzzle and things took off.
But you're paying, and obviously the contract kicks in March or going into the season, but they believe Jalen Hurts is their franchise quarterback, and when you give a guy that kind of contract, you would like to believe that he can elevate beyond just one player being out. And granted, that one player is a huge piece of the puzzle, but I always feel like I would like to think the quarterback is a much larger piece of the puzzle.
Well, the quarterback is, because it's obviously the most important position on the field.
And I also would like to think Jalen Hurts has improved as a quarterback since 2021.
Yeah, and I think he has, but he was also didn't look as healthy as he had in prior seasons. And we know the knee injury. Maybe there were some other things, because really, if you go back even early in the season before he hurt his knee, he didn't look like he had the same burst. So maybe something else was going on. And he didn't play, he didn't play well down the stretch. And he started getting back into some bad habits, flushing immediately instead of trying to climb the pocket, manipulate the pocket, extend plays that way. And once you start doing that, teams try to take advantage of it. And I think teams did a good job with their adjustments, and the Eagles didn't do a good job adjusting back. But yeah, he's got to play better. I mean, in a lot of ways, because of all the coaching stuff, he's kind of skating by. He played really poorly down the stretch, which was a disappointment.
Could that be the comfortable thing that Jeffrey's talking about? Like, yeah, the onus is on the quarterback to definitely avoid the bad habits, but also the onus is also on the coaching staff to monitor the quarterback's bad habits and try to keep them at bay, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it had more to do with, Brian Johnson being close to him and wanting more of a bad cop, which the same they said the same thing with Carson Wentz and Press
Yeah, I
Taylor.
was going to say the John DeFilippo thing was, in my opinion, to Jalen Hurts' benefit because he was a no nonsense and he was very rigid with what he wanted from the quarterback.
Yeah, John is, but and you try to blame it on assistant coaches, and I mean, it drives me insane.
Mhm.
It's the players. It's the players. Um, you're not winning 14 games because the coaching staff is doing this phenomenal. I get, like I said, when I'm watching the championship games, all anybody talks about are the coaches. It's absurd to me. It really is. In the moment, as I said, they'll say, "Oh, so and so made a great play. Jameson Williams made a great play." Um, on the reverse and scoring a touchdown, and then it's back to the coaches, and then it's
Okay.
back to the coaches, and then it's
Let me-
back to the coaches.
Let me ask you this question that just popped into my head, and it's in relation to what we're talking about here. Let's say an average NFL team, 8-9. Average NFL team, 8-9 record. How many wins does a great coach add on to that 8-9 record, and how many losses does a bad coach add on to that record?
You can lose more than you win. You can lose more than you win. You might, if you have Bill Belichick in his prime or Andy Reid in the prime, you give everybody the same roster, they're probably going to win one or two more games than an average coach. And a bad coach can definitely lose some games with some poor decision making. If you look at the advanced stats and the decision making, nobody helped their team more. Again, I say ironically than Dan Campbell this year, because he was ahead of the curve. He was ahead of the curve in the fact that, again, ironically, goes for it so much on fourth down. Typically, that's a good thing because it puts so much pressure on the opposing team. You got to defend. Makes common sense. You got to defend 4 downs instead of 3 downs. It's a hell of a lot easier to get 10 yards and 4 downs than 10 yards and 3 downs. I'm surprised it took this long for somebody to go in that direction. So he was the coach that was helping his team the most by his decision making.
Wasn't Doug Peterson kind of on that curve as well? I mean, he was going
Doug
for it a
was
lot.
Doug was ahead of the curve in definitely in 2017. And that was big for the Eagles. And now Dan was this year. Dan kind of blew it up this year. And then people talk about Brandon Staley not being as successful with it. And it's easy, but
some of his decision making was just whoa. He would go for it on fourth down at his own 15, at his own 20. I'm like, Brandon, I'm all for aggressiveness, but time.
Yeah, well, the time is when you make it, and the place is when you don't make it. So I mean, that's yeah. I mean, generally, Dan would go minus 40. So at your own 40-yard line forward, you knew if they were close, they were going to go for it, and that puts tremendous pressure on the opposing team. Yeah, when you're backed up, obviously you got to use a little bit more sense. But there was the high school coach who never punted. Just said, "I'm going for it every time." And I'm surprised it's taken this long. And more people, you're going to see more teams follow what the Lions did this year, which is going to shock people because of what happened in the NFC Championship game. But again, if somebody drops the football, that's not a bad decision because you would have converted if the team executed. So
Correct.
you have to execute. You have to have a good team. You have to have a good offense to do it. But if you have a good offense and you're using all 4 of your downs, that is tough to deal with. Tough,
I'm
tough to deal with.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Look, and you speak about it all the time. Look, a coach can make the perfect decision, but the result may not be favorable because someone on the field didn't do their job. And everyone ultimately has a job to do. And your biggest problem, from listening to you, for as much as many conversations we've had, your biggest problem is stop taking the onus off of people when they have a job to do. Period.
Well, the players are so much more important than the
Right.
coaches. I
Right.
think there's a sentiment that, oh, if you just had a good coach, he'd turn insert Quez Watkins into a,
And that's your problem with the Eagles' decision making this season. They put too much of based on their moves with the firings. You look at it as you don't have the players. You're looking at the coaches to kind of turn this pig into a prom
yeah.
queen.
I mean, a lot of people, Denard Wilson finally got a job as a defensive coordinator.
Congratulations to him as well with Tennessee, right?
Yeah. And, and I'm sure Denard was upset. And Denard, I believe, should have been promoted here. But, I wrote today, he should be happy. He got lucky. He had to wait 12 months, but he got lucky. Because if he were the defensive coordinator here last year, he might have been a little bit better, but they were a disaster personnel-wise.
Right.
I don't care who you're throwing in there. You can bring, George Hallis back, Vince Lombardi back, whomever you think is the greatest coach in the history of the world. This Eagles defense wasn't going to be good this year. They were really bad in the back seven. And it wasn't going to change with Denard Wilson. And the same thing. So what would have happened is, Vic didn't want to be in Miami. Vic would have been here. Same thing would have happened. Maybe they have the 20th ranked defense, and the Eagles would have done the same thing. They would have blown out Denard Wilson after 1 year because he didn't do a good enough job, and they would have brought Vic Fangio. So now he has a legitimate opportunity with a rookie head coach that's an offensive-minded guy. Nobody gets a long rope in today's NFL, but he'll get a longer rope to learn on the job and grow on the job. And he wouldn't have gotten that here. So long term, even though he's probably upset about being passed over, not probably, definitely, even though he should have been upset, long term, probably worked out for him a little bit better. He's going to have a better opportunity to get his footing and become a legitimate defensive coordinator in this league.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Real quick before we get out of here, I kind of want to shift a little bit. I kind of want to talk to you about the idea of roster building in the NFL as it pertains to the Philadelphia Eagles. And this topic I'm going to bring up to you, some may deem it as a bit forward. Some may say, you're reaching a little bit. But I want to get your perspective because I care about your opinion, John.
That makes one. All right.
When you really think back to this Philadelphia Eagles team, let's just go back to the 2017 season when they won the Super Bowl. I want to ask you this question, and I don't want to pollute it too much, but I'll ask you straight up: had the Philadelphia Eagles been on borrowed time since they won Super Bowl 52? And here's why I asked that. When you think about the way they built that team, there was a lot of free agents that comprised their starters, right? You think about Timmy Jernigan, drafted by the Ravens. The Eagles didn't draft him. Torrey Smith, the Eagles did not draft him. Ronald Darby, Buffalo. Nigel Bradham, Buffalo. Alshon Jeffrey, Chicago. Jake Elliott was drafted by Cincinnati. Brandon Brooks, Houston Texans. Jay Ajayi, Miami. Kamu Grugier-Hill, New England. Malcolm Jenkins, New Orleans. Patrick Robinson, New Orleans. Stefan Wisniewski, Oakland Raiders. Darren Sproles, San Diego. Chris Long, St. Louis. Najee Good, Tampa Bay. You know, my point is, Philadelphia Eagles, they've been really relying on the free agent pool to really fill out their roster. And in my opinion, they haven't done a good enough job drafting over the course of time to really prepare them today so they can have a solid foundation. You look at that defensive side today, a lot of mercenaries, not enough drafted talent, you know, to get you through, and they're not hitting enough, right? So again, I ask, is it possible or realistic to say the Eagles have kind of been on borrowed time since that Super Bowl because they haven't really had as much draft success as they have free agency?
Well, draft is always important, but no, I wouldn't talk about 2017. Now in the NFL, you're talking about 2-3 year increments, sort of little patches, and 2017 has absolutely nothing to do with 2024 right now.
Okay.
You know, it's great when you get players like Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, who stay around for as long as they have. But, you know, point to another core four around the NFL. Doesn't exist. I guess that doesn't exist. Literally does not exist anywhere else.
You bring up a good point that from a personnel standpoint, there's no real correlation. But
no,
the philosophy of the philosophy and their habits, and what I mean by that is the habit of not hitting on defensive draft picks, right? And when you don't hit on draft picks, it puts you in a position of having to supplement that miss with the free agent signing. And I think that's where the Philadelphia Eagles have found themselves time and time again, and I think that's their problem today.
Well, I brought up Detroit, who had a great draft this year, especially when it came to meaningful, immediate contributors. But, you know, their history is pretty dismal overall. So it can change quickly. Obviously, it's an inexact science. I mean, I would argue, you know, last year, pretty good with Jalen Carter. I mean, it should be at that point, especially you get a guy who arguably should have been the top pick at number 9. So most of the issues there had to do with off the field stuff. You know, Nolan Smith, I know my partner in the morning thinks he's a bust. I'm like, it's 1 year. Was it good? No. I'm more concerned about his health long-term with the shoulder. But I'm not ready to give up on him. And then if you go back to the year prior with Nakobe Dean, same thing, health issue. Are you ready to give up on him as being a terrible draft pick? Some people do.
Jody loved Nakobe Dean, didn't he?
Yeah, he loved Nakobe. So he's not ready to give up on him. No, he's not ready. But he admits you can't count on him. Now, the problem is there have been a couple years, really, if you want to go back, because of the Carson Wentz trade. There was a 2-year period where they had 5 picks, ended up with 5 picks. Because obviously,
2018 was one of those years, right? That was the Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, but 2018 was actually a phenomenal draft, though. They only had 5 picks, but they got Dallas Goedert, Avonte Maddox, they got Josh Sweat, they got Jordan Mailata.
That was a phenomenal draft. Absolutely right.
And even Matt Pryor turned in, you know, to a long-term NFL player.
Right. He's in Indianapolis, right?
I was in San Francisco. I forget where he ended up. But he's played like 75 NFL games. That's pretty good for a 6th-round pick. So
right. As of right now, yes, he was on San Fran's roster. Played in 15 games. Gave him some quality reps. Matt Pryor. I know we're going off on a tangent with Matt Pryor. Didn't see that coming, but
well, that's a good 6th-round pick. Even though people might say Matt Pryor, I mean that's what you want out of a 6th-round pick. If you get a 6th-round pick that plays 75 NFL games, to me, you're hitting on the draft pick.
Exactly. Absolutely. He's contributed north of 1,900 offensive snaps in 2023. Played 42 offensive snaps, 5% of the total snaps he was available for. But again, he's an offensive lineman. They don't rotate those guys. They put him in as needed. So,
Yeah, and then the next year was pretty bad, where you got Miles and not much else. Andre Dillard, still going to be in the league because he's got talent, but never turned into what certainly the Eagles expected. Now that's somewhat mitigated by Jordan Mailata turning into a star, which nobody projected or should.
If you can compare it to anything, you probably could compare it to the San Fran thing with Brock Purdy and Trey Lance. Obviously, the Eagles didn't leverage 3 first-round picks for Dillard, but in terms of just a first-round talent in comparison to a 7th-round no man's land player, you can probably compare it to that.
Yeah, you're taking a flyer and it worked out, and that's actually a good comp because the 49ers plan was to go with Trey Lance, and it didn't work, but it was mitigated by
and they tried to give him the job. They tried.
Yeah.
They tried to get the same thing with the Eagles. They tried everything possible to get Dillard on the field.
And when you miss, and then you go to 2020, when you miss on a player like Jefferson at the same position, not only was it the same position, but it was 21-22. So he went right after Rager. That's always going to look bad. But I mean, you can't, everybody makes mistakes on draft picks, and there's such revisionist history.
Yeah, mistakes is one thing. Because all right, I do agree with you. Mistakes happen. And look, sometimes you draft a guy and he just doesn't pan out. I totally understand that. But here's my retort to that, right? If you miss on, Kayvon Thibodeau. If you missed on Kayvon Thibodeau, okay, can I really get mad at you? Everybody was talking about Kayvon Thibodeau. You know what I mean? I can't get mad.
They didn't miss on him.
But what I'm saying is, let's say Kayvon Thibodeau did not amount to what people thought he would be, right? Am I going to kill a team for drafting a guy that everybody wanted? No. But no one was talking about Jalen Reagor.
See, that's that's absolutely that bothers me. That's absolutely not true.
Make it make sense for me then.
At the worst, Jalen Reagor was going to get picked by the Saints. They were going to take him, and I forget what number. I'd have to look it up, but it was pretty soon after the Eagles took him, and the Saints were going to take him. And this because I've heard that a lot, like Jalen Reagor shouldn't have been a first-round pick. That's bullshit. I mean, the whole league thought he was going to be
here it is. So
pick at the bare minimum. At the bare minimum, a bridge pick,
right?
Meaning end of first round, early second round. That was the floor for Jalen Reagor. I don't know where that started. So the Saints had the 24th pick. Okay. They were going to take him at 24.
Right. They chose Cesar Ruiz as center. Okay. I see your point. I see your point.
Now the problem is it's not only Jefferson, because Ayuk won at 25 and he's turned into a great player. So yeah, it looks bad, but this nonsense that the Eagles were the only team going to take Jalen Reagor and he would have been like a 3rd round pick if they, I don't know where that comes from. That's just blatant revisionist history. He was a big time prospect who didn't live up to the hype. You take a look at Minnesota gets Jefferson, who's, and by the way, he went 22nd. So what does that mean? That means there's 21 other picks and 20 besides the Eagles who also passed on what is arguably not even arguably the best player in the draft. You could say Joe Burrow because he's more important at a quarterback, and all right, but the best pure football player in the draft, went 22nd. So the Eagles weren't the only team saying, oh, he's a slot receiver, because guess what? LSU played him in the slot, and a bunch of people bought into it and said, well, he probably can't play outside. And, they stuck him outside and he turned into this great player. And yeah, And by the way, they also, as I also point out, they had a high volume quarterback who throws for a ton of yards, no matter who he has. And if he would have came here, it wouldn't have been the same. That's another thing. Fit matters. And the same team took Jeff Gladney, rest his soul, because he passed away in a car accident,
Right.
in the first round, who was a bust before he got into problems. So the same team had 2 first-round picks. Yeah, they hit on one. They missed really poorly on the other. There's so much revisionist history when it comes to the draft. They certainly missed the pick. But overall, getting back to the original point, 2021 was a good draft.
Right.
Um,
Really quickly though, before we get back to the original point, I will say this. Although what you're saying may be true, that people were going to pick Jalen Reagor. Okay, I won't deny that. But I will say this: one guy that I do respect highly as far as his opinion on prospects is Daniel Jeremiah, right? And I respect your opinion as well. I want to make that clear too. But Daniel Jeremiah, he puts out his top 50 players every single year. And I'm looking at his top 50 players from that year in particular. And, I see T. Higgins, I see CD Lamb, I see all the Justin Jefferson, I see all those guys. Brendan Ayuk even made the list at 27. I see a lot of the wide receivers that was chosen around Jalen Reagor in his top 50. And Jalen Reagor is nowhere to be found. And I'm not saying Dave Jeremiah is law, but again, I even see Laviska Shenault in his top 50 of wide receivers. I don't see Jalen Reagor anywhere. So I guess my point is, I'm trying to.
Daniel does probably 10 versions of that list.
That's true too.
Through the process. So at one point, was he not on that list? I don't know if that's the final list. And I'm just looking up, and yeah, NFL.com had him as a first round pick. So you can go look at a bunch of different scouting. And like I said, draft day, his ceiling was bridge pick, which again, end of first, top of second, and all of that. And even that doesn't matter because New Orleans was going to take him.
Yeah.
And they had the 24th pick.
And
the Eagles did take him. Yeah. So I love Daniel. I love him. I think he's phenomenal. Sure. But bottom line is NFL teams are going to take him in the first round.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. Someone was going to take him because, to your point as well, I'm looking at PFF's, positional rankings for that year as well. And at wide receiver, they had him ranked as the 5th best wide receiver. And, Jerry Jeudy went before him. CD Lamb went before him. Henry Ruggs went before him. Laviska Shenault went after him. Michael Pittman went after him.
I don't even hear Jefferson.
Yeah, right. Let me just tell you who PFF has their top 10 receivers in that draft, right? They had Jerry Jeudy at 1, CD Lamb at 2, Ruggs at 3, Laviska Shenault at 4, Jalen Reagor at 5, Michael Pittman at 6, T. Higgins at 7, Justin Jefferson at 8, Ayuk at 9, Mims at 10. So clearly a lot of people, to your point, a lot of people were down on Justin Jefferson. They were down on Justin Jefferson entering that draft. They clearly.
I wouldn't even say that. I would say because most people graded him as a first round pick,
right? And but I think a lot of people felt like he was just a slot guy, right?
Yeah, and he went about where he was expected to go,
right?
And he's just a hell of a lot better than people realized, and that happens, and it happens all the time. If people redrafted again, he'd be a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
If people redrafted last year, it might change,
right.
but this revisionist history also fit matters, which I said, I by no means am I trying to excuse the Jalen Reagor pick.
No, I don't think you are. And I'm not taking it as that. I think what you're saying is let's be reasonable about this.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, that's what I'm getting from you.
And, the Eagles, the problem with that is the Eagles had to draft Devontae Smith the next year. They had to sign A.J. Brown to $100 million, all because they missed on this pick. So it had a butterfly effect.
Mhm.
And when you're doing that, yeah, it's great to have Devontae and A.J. But when you're doing that, those are assets that could have gone to different positions.
Exactly. And I think that's my overall point when I bring up this conversation, right? Especially with the draft picks. And I know we've definitely gotten kind of far from it, but I think we can bring it full circle with the fact that, they've had to supplement decisions that didn't pan out for them with either drafting a guy at the same position in the following draft or making a trade.
But
And that
I
in turn,
challenge you. You can go to Pro Football Reference and look
right,
at any team,
right,
every single team, and you will see missed draft picks all over the place.
correct. That's
It
true.
is an inexact science. The assumption to go back now, a lot of people are going back to 2022. Oh, you should have taken Kyle Hamilton
It's,
over Jordan Davis.
when people say that, I kind of laugh because it's easy to say that because I remember on draft night, I remember what the energy was on draft night. People were excited as hell for Jordan Davis. They were
Well,
so happy
the irony is the Eagles had to go up ahead of Baltimore to draft Jordan Davis
because
because
that's
if
who
they
they wanted.
didn't, yes, they would have drafted Jordan Davis. And Kyle's a great player. Jody and I both
Tremendous.
loved him coming out. And it's one of the ones we got right. But yeah, I mean, Jordan Davis was a big time prospect at a more valuable position, not just in the Eagles' mind, but around the league's mind. So he went where he went. And right now, I don't know. I think he's been a good player. I just think I was concerned from day one about that pick because I thought it was too esoteric and that, I expected him to eventually become Haloti Nada, a dominant run stopper, Vita Vea, that type of player.
Right.
People want sacks. And I said, if you want sacks,
That's not the
you're
guy.
not going to like this pick.
John, do me a quick favor. Can you define esoteric? Whenever you use that word, I always say to myself, I got to use that word because you use it just perfectly, and it's always in the context of Jordan Davis. Can you define that word for me, man? Because I
Well,
know I want to use it.
it understood by a small number of people with, specialized knowledge of a certain subject.
Ah,
And I always thought that he would be a big time. And by the way, I still believe as the Eagles move forward, um, the foundation of this defense under Vic Fangio will be built on Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis.
do you think that Jordan Davis pick is the kind of pick that you appreciate? Like you said, it's an esoteric move. Do you think that's the kind of move that you don't appreciate initially? That's something that's a 4, 5, 6 years, 7 years down the line. You really feel the
Well,
value of that move.
if he turns into what he was projected to be, he hasn't been that yet. He hasn't been Haloti Nada yet. He hasn't
Right.
been Vita Vea yet.
He
But
hasn't
if he
even been
turn,
terrible. It's just that
no,
his conditioning has been the issue.
yeah, that's part of it. And if he turns into Vita Vea, yes, he'll be appreciated down the road, but it'll take a while.
Mm. So I don't know how you see these two players. Because I know you said Vita Vea. I know I've heard of Vince Wilfork. I don't know how you tier those
Yeah,
two players, but
Vince is in that category as well.
right.
In his
So
prime.
what would you, if you had to use players as the metric, what's the floor and what's the ceiling for a guy like Jordan Davis if you're using two players as the ceiling and the floor?
Well, the ceiling is Haloti Nada. That's what I always said is the
Okay.
ceiling. The floor, you've already seen the floor because he's pretty good now. And he can get a lot better. So is he the dominant player, the dominant run stopper you want? He was for about 8 games. And again, some of the conditioning issues, which ironically, I mean, for 300, just from a cosmetic standpoint, like he doesn't look out of shape. But there's a big difference between cosmetic shape and NFL shape. And he didn't play a lot at Georgia because they're so gifted and talented up and down. They rotate. So he wasn't asked to play 50 snaps. And here you want him 50 might be a little bit high for him, but you want him consistently near the 40 mark. And will he ever get there? He better. And the same thing happened with Jalen Carter. Now, Jalen's got to be out there basically every play. That's where you want to get Jalen Carter. You want to get Jalen Carter into the Aaron Donald realm.
Yeah, into the Fletcher Cox, because Fletcher Cox, he actually, a lot of people don't realize this. Fletch early in his, like in that first half of his career, even maybe the third of the way into his career, Fletcher was regularly flirting around 70-80% of the snaps regularly.
And I would argue you want to even go higher with Jalen Carter if you can, because he's, like I said, he's so gifted. If he can handle it, you don't want him to come off very often. Now, the Eagles have always believed in rotating and coming at you in those waves, so they're probably not going to go to that extreme. But there are certain guys, mainly edge rushers, the Aiden Hutchinsons of the world, another pick for Detroit. Max Crosby.
Max Crosby's a freak. I try not to compare people to him.
Yeah, they never leave the field. Ever.
His motor is almost unrealistic. His motor is Madden level. But to your point about Aaron Donald, this past season in 2023, he accounted for 81% of the defensive snaps. In 2022, 89%. 2021, 90%. That was the first and only year he went over 1,000 snaps on defense. And I think 2021 was the year that they won that Super Bowl. So he gave them his all in that Super Bowl year, and lo and behold, it paid off.
Yeah. So they're people think of defensive line. I think more so in Philadelphia because it has been such a rotational position here, but not for everybody. There are guys who rarely leave the field, and not a lot, but there are guys who rarely leave the field. And Jalen Carter's so gifted that if he can do it, I would want to turn him into that type of player. I don't know if he can do it though.
Okay. Final question, John, before we get out of here. And it pertains to what we're talking about, these Georgia guys. Obviously they come from a program where they were being rotated, right? We talked about it. It was so much, they were so deep on those rosters. Some players had to transfer, some players barely got into the rotation, so on and so forth. And they were also dominating teams. So they didn't have to keep certain guys in like Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. Yeah. I say all that to say, and you said it, cosmetically, Jordan Davis looked like he was in shape. Jalen Carter, same thing, but still there's a difference. How do they improve? Is that something, in your opinion, in your experience, is that something that you've seen improve over the offseason, or is something that just improves as the guys get deeper into their careers?
Oh yeah, that's offseason stuff. That's, when guys are working out and left to their own devices, and you'll see workout videos and that's sort of where you work on that kind of stuff and get in that kind of shape and being, and some guys do it and some guys don't. And it's kind of the new era of the NFL. It's like the really truly great players do so much work on their own to get to that level of physical shape. Christian McCaffrey, a different position, obviously, but I mean, that guy's just, talk to Colin Thompson about him occasionally. It's just unbelievable. Randy Moss is a guy, it was because I got to cover, and Randy had the reputation of taking plays off, and guy never missed a practice, but not a game. He tore his hamstring in I don't know, 7th, 8th season. He had never missed a game to that point, and he never missed a practice. He never missed a practice. And, people had this thought process of him that he was just a physical freak. No, if you're that gifted, you're a physical freak, but you work your ass off on top of it.
Right, right. Hey, listen, Eagles fans, we appreciate you guys as always for locking in on the show. Please make sure you guys smash that like button. We really appreciate it. And also make sure you guys are subscribed to the JAKIB Sports Network on YouTube. If you guys want more content from John McMullen, check him out on Birds 365. He's on there Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern time with his partner in crime, the legendary Jody McDonald, Jody Mack, the Mac Man. On top of that, make sure you guys check out John's articles on si.com and also on jakibsports.com. He does great work covering the Philadelphia Eagles. Very insightful, very objective, very clean writing. And I appreciate John as always for providing his time to the platform. It means a lot to me. I know he's a busy guy, so I hope you guys appreciate him as well. Again, smash that like button and make sure you guys are subscribed to the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. He's John McMullen. I'm your guy, Tone DeShields II, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messon Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messon